Hello, friends. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has just announced a new date for talks between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations. Earlier, everyone thought representatives from Moscow and Kyiv, possibly with some unnamed U.S. officials involved, might meet as soon as February 1st. But on Sunday, nothing happened. No contacts, no handshakes. Now they're talking about February 4th or 5th. Where exactly will this take place? Will the United States be represented? That's still a mystery. But right before this potential new round of consultations, two high-ranking Russian officials, Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of Russia's Security Council and former president, and Sergei Lavrov, the head of Russia's foreign ministry, made statements that clearly show Moscow isn't budging. They're sticking to their hardline position, which doesn't foresee an end to the fighting anytime soon. Let's break it down in more detail. Medvedev was chatting with journalists and confidently proclaimed Russia's victory in this war. He even suggested the conflict could spread to other countries. That sounds like a threat, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Lavrov accused Europeans of hindering the development of Russian-American relations. Both emphasized that Russia is a great power, ready for cooperation with America. This mirrors the tactic Vladimir Putin has been using for over a year now. He constantly reminds everyone that he's open to discussion and fruitful collaboration with the United States, even if there are no real signs of understanding. The goal? Avoid escalating to a bigger conflict. Lavrov straight up said that a harsher confrontation between Russia and the U.S. would be not just a mistake, but a real crime. Folks, this comes across as an indirect warning to the Trump administration. Don't ramp up aid to Ukraine, because that could lead to a direct clash between Moscow and Washington. From an American viewpoint, this looks like classic diplomacy mixed with blackmail. The Russians are trying to use these talks not for peace, but to block more effective U.S. support for Ukraine. That way, they improve conditions for their own forces on the ground. It's logical for an aggressor hoping that ongoing strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure and offensives will force Kyiv to capitulate and perhaps even erase Ukraine from the world's political map. But for us Americans, it's illogical. Why? Because our leaders are showing they lack real leverage over Russia's position despite new economic sanctions against giants like Rosneft and Lukoil, and the hunt for Russia's shadow fleet of tankers. On one hand, the U.S. talks about threats from Russia to America itself. For example, declaring a state of emergency over Cuba's actions, citing a Russian radar station that's been donned for years. On the other hand, when it comes to Russia's war on Ukraine, that danger seems to be overlooked. Friends, let's think about why this matters to us right here in the States. This war isn't just a distant conflict. It's impacting our gas prices, global trade, and our national security. Russia is trying to divide the West, especially the U.S. from Europe. Medvedev and Lavrov stress the desire for cooperation with America because they know Trump loves talking about business and economics. Lavrov even hinted at economic ties between Moscow and Washington. This is part of Putin's broader strategy: drag out time, pressure Ukraine, and simultaneously build bridges with the new Trump administration. With Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, this tactic has only intensified. The Russians see him as an opportunity for a grand deal. But how should we respond to Moscow's tactics? A lot of people doubt that these February 4 to 5 talks will yield real compromises. Ukraine can't refuse them, because it all looks like theater for one audience: Donald Trump. He wants to show he can solve the conflict quickly, as he promised in his campaign. And here's an interesting point. Even if it's a show, it could bring interim results. For instance, the so-called energy truce, halting strikes on energy infrastructure, is already in effect. If it holds, that's a first win. Trump might push Putin for practical steps to show success to his voters. And who knows, targeted ceasefires in other areas might emerge. De-escalation here and there, even if full peace is far off. Of course, this isn't what Trump wants. He promised a swift end to the war. And it's not what Ukrainians desire, who suffer from daily attacks. But for Putin, it's not ideal either. He hopes to continue the war without any restrictions. However, with each month, Trump, especially under pressure from the U.S. election campaign, will demand new concessions from him in exchange for not imposing harsher sanctions or escalating support for Kyiv. This could become a new dynamic. Russia yields on small things to avoid worse. Let's delve into the context, friends. This war has been raging since 2022, and Russia has used negotiations as a tool for pressure from the start. They're not seeking compromises, just opportunities to buy time and weaken the West. From an American perspective, this echoes the Cold War. Moscow is playing on our internal divisions, especially with Trump, who has criticized NATO and European allies. Remember how Trump said Europe should pay more for defense? The Russians hear that and try to exploit it. Now about Zelenskyy. He's in a tough spot. Ukraine depends on American aid, weapons, finances, diplomacy. If Trump decides to cut support, as he's hinted, it would be disastrous for Kyiv. But Zelenskyy is maneuvering, announcing talk dates to show willingness for dialogue. That's smart. Don't give Trump a reason to say Ukraine doesn't want peace. And regarding the Russian statements, Medvedev is an old player, a former president now acting as a hawk. His words about spreading the war are psychological warfare to intimidate Europe and the U.S. Lavrov, on the other hand, is a diplomacy master. He always talks about cooperation with America because he knows Trump likes hearing about deals. But behind these words lies the real goal: neutralize American aid to Ukraine. From the U.S. standpoint, we need to be cautious. Our sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil are good, but not enough. The shadow tanker fleet lets Russia bypass oil embargoes. We're hunting them, but it's a cat-and-mouse game. And here's the irony. We declare emergencies over Cuba, citing old Russian bases, but ignore the real threat in Europe. Why? Because the Ukraine war seems not our problem to some Americans. But that's a mistake. If Russia wins, it emboldens China on Taiwan, Iran in the Middle East. What should America do? First, don't fall for Russian tactics. Trump should demand real concessions, not just words. Second, continue supporting Ukraine, more weapons, more sanctions. Third, strengthen NATO, show we're a united front. And finally, remember this isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the global order. If we back down, the world becomes more dangerous for all of us. Friends, this is a complex situation, but we Americans always find a way. Let's keep an eye on those February 4-5 talks. If they happen, it could be the start of something, or just another bluff. I'll keep you updated. Stay tuned to the channel, subscribe, hit that like button. Good luck to us all.